So over the past couple of days, I have been obsessively reading Junji Ito's what am I talking about? Junji Ito's Uzumaki, the famous horror manga, and I was completely hooked. I honestly did not want to put it down for the entire time I was reading it. I probably would have finished it in one day if I had I did really wanted to, but unfortunately, things got in the way. I have my own things to worry about. I had other things to do, but um, throughout that entire span of time where I was doing other things, I was inevitably thinking about Uzumaki. I was thinking about the spirals and the curves and where things would develop from here, and just I was so won over by just the sheer creativity and bizarre nature of it. I'm being completely serious here, and that I don't think this really does feel, if nothing else, like a completely original concept. And anyone who says that like originality is dead is clearly not a fan of Japanese media, because I always keep coming across shit like this. And it really did impress me with how the author was able to come up with all these crazy, interesting uses for spirals. This really creative, otherworldly curse. It quite surprised me. I think I knew vaguely what this was about. Like, I knew that, like, ooh, it's about spirals, but I knew that much. But going into it, like, I was really surprised by like the direction they took it, at least at first, with the whole like setup and like the horror and like the events and how like specific people are affected by it. It really won me over. Weak spots aside, and there are some very glaring weak spots. Like, Junji Ito seems to be the kind of writer that really excels at certain things, like coming up with cool ideas for things that happen to characters, but he kind of sucks at like a continuity, getting characters to behave realistically, sort of developing an overarching plot. Because when you get right down to it, all it is just terrible things happening until the main characters succumb to the spiral, so to speak. It's just a bunch of crazy ass bullshit that has no rhyme or reason to it, and that would be enjoyable if it sort of like was consistent and sort of it's weird about this, because the manga seems to jump back and forth in between like explaining too much and then explaining too little. So like when you get too little, the information you got that's too much, it just has you asking so many questions. It becomes ridiculous, right? So for example, this is something I noticed by chapter 7 is no, chapter 6 actually. Like, Suichi seems to inexplicably have the power to spot when the spiral is about to appear before it ever does. Like, he specifically tells Kiri, I think that's how you pronounce her name, Kiri, to go out to cut her hair, because he just knows that the spiral is going to appear there. And that moment was just like, how does he have the power to do that? Why? How is he able to do that? How is he able to just, look at her hair, which isn't spiral yet, and being able to be like, yeah, you better cut that shit off before it starts possessing people and starts like draining your energy. And somehow he's able to like explain all these really convoluted ways in which like the spiral takes effect. Like, he's able to spot like mosquito people. He's able to like figure out that like Curie is being stalked by the eye of a hurricane, which makes absolutely no sense to me. He's able to like come up with all this crazy explanations that seem to be 100% correct. like all the time. He just knows, like he knows the spiral like better than he does his own GF apparently, because he's always obsessing over it and like freaking out. It did kill both of his parents, so there's a justification for that. But that leads to another problem, which like his parents die in very very brutal ways. His mother especially, I think, very creative brutal ways. And it doesn't seem he goes insane, right? He does go insane, but but it doesn't seem he doesn't bring up his parents specifically at all. Like it doesn't point out like how he's living. It doesn't figure out like how he's getting by, like how exactly this is affecting him. It doesn't come up. He just like hangs out with his GF, like really until stuff starts kicking off again. Like nothing happened. Like every chapter, some terrible bullshit happens, and by the next one, usually, at least for the first 2 volumes, it doesn't really matter anymore. Like it just sort of, it's just sort of forgotten about. They know the spiral exists, but it's weird. Like all this crazy ass bullshit. Like characters don't have nightmares. They're not freaking out. They're just sort of like there. It's until something terrible happens again. It's really really bizarre. Like how this plays out, and I guess you could argue this might be part of the curse. Why everyone is like so ridiculously stupid, but it's just like come on, dude. No one's that fucking stupid. Like unbelievable. And a lot of the times, personally, I was not terribly frightened by the story itself. I think the closest thing I got to being a nerd was the whole snail chapter. The snail concept in general kind of got to me with the whole being eaten alive and stuff like that, like turning into a snail and then having sex with another guy and breeding with him, a guy who bullied you, I should say specifically. Yeah, you're fucking bully, and then like leaving behind snail people, and like, oof. It's just really, it's really out there and insane, but like not necessarily in a good way. Like sometimes, right. Sometimes, sometimes it's great. But when it's not, it really bogs down the story, I think. Like, towards the end, where, like, the town is decaying and becoming, like, completely insane, it's just like, well... It's such a bullshit situation that makes absolutely no sense. And you kind of feel bad for the characters, right? But other than that, it's such an insane leap of logic for the curse to like escalate the way it has. Like I was much happier, with the whole anthology aspect and having the curse affect people in different ways. Like there was no need to like for it to like grow and destroy the entire town. There was no reason to explain there's some kind of ancient civilization underneath the ground that somehow has like mind control powers. That was dumb as shit. And the characters just sort of like give up in the end. They like see the city and they're just like, oh, there's nothing we can do. I guess we'll just stay here forever. And they do. Apparently the time spiral the spiral has time powers, and they just stay in that one spot forever, just together, which is kind of charming in its own way. But like such an underwhelming ending. It really was. It's just. They couldn't have. It just feels like that. We have to come up with an ending instead of just. I think an outright deliberate not explaining anything would have been better in this specific instance. Like it's just contaminated by spirals. Like you don't have to like escalate the situation. You don't have to have like to bring back old concepts and try to do new stuff with it. Like they brought back like the twisting, the snails, like. It really does feel like by volume 3 he was kind of running out of ideas because like it's just all this stupid, ridiculous bullshit that doesn't make any sense. If you're noisy, the spiral will amplify your attacks and give you wind powers. It's just what? That's not scary. That's not interesting. Like the whole hair thing was like goofy, but it was so like it was. charming enough that it sort of like I was invested in it anyway. Like the whole town thing was just, oh, damn, I did not care for that at all. It was boring. I was just, ugh. I mean, the best thing about it was the whole like snail thing, I would say, or like people struggling to survive and like sort of turning on each other. That was kind of interesting. It was nice seeing like some continuity near the end, but I don't know, man. Like I would have preferred it to have been one continuing story rather than like throughout the whole thing, rather than like just being ooh, let's meet someone who's being fucked over by the spiral. It's just uh and then Curie is like, I've talked about the characters being dumb, but like uh it's bizarre how they go back and forth between like explaining vague examples of spirals in nature to like not realizing that like, yeah, maybe it's not the spiral this time, guys. They don't literally say that, but like they don't immediately, considering all the crazy shit that's happened, they see something bizarre and they don't immediately think that like, oh, it's the spiral. Like Suichi figures it out, but apparently it's because like he has like some instinct for it. It's not because he's like logically thinking about it. It's just like, yeah, the spiral is going to take place. This town is contaminated by spirals. It's man, it's ridiculous, but boy, is it fun. I really enjoyed myself throughout the entire thing. Again, the entire concept isn't that scary to me. Like personally, they were explaining how the spiral sort of like draws people's eyes to move to the center, and my eye just glazed right over it. So apparently, if I was in this town, if I was like in this town contaminated by spirals, I would have the ability to just walk out of there because like I don't fucking look at the center of a spiral just because it's there. Like I have better things to do with my time. Just unbelievable. So yeah, spirals aren't scary. Like spoiler alert. Like it just like it's creative, but like man, I think like with the whole baby thing, I don't even think that has anything to do with spirals. It's just like crazy bullshit for the sake of like happening, like being gross essentially, and it doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't really make any sense why the town would do that. Like specifically, like why would they just why are they just doing all this weird shit with these very specific people and just it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And like when it doesn't work, and I really do mean this, when it doesn't work, it really doesn't work. Like when it's fun, it's really fun, but it's very noticeable when it has some sort of issue with like the pacing or the plot or the characters or just anything that happens. In fact, like if anything, when the story was at its when it's at its best, like character wise, it's just them being like normal. It's just them like interacting with stalkers and showing affection to one another, and just yeah, that's one thing I will say about this is that like you really do get the impression that the main characters do care about each other a lot, and that's something that they don't really go into depth about it, and it's something that I found very charming for the first volumes anyway. Like when they die at the end, I was just like, okay, I don't care, but yeah, throughout the vast majority of it, like when they're hanging out, looking at the water, and Kiri is just like, you know, if it wasn't for you, I would have been dead by now a long time ago. It's like morbid, but it's somehow like really charming and heartwarming at the same time. I was really invested in these characters, in spite of how like ridiculous these situations are, in spite of like how easy it would be to get out of like some of these situations, especially with the hospital. Why did they not listen to the girl who saw what happened in the hospital? Oh, we have no idea. We have no witnesses except this girl who told us specifically what happened. It's just, it's so, it's all over the place, but like when it's good, it's really good. I do think I am a fan. I think I am going to pick up another story here soon. I'm looking at Gyo actually, and Tomi. I think I will get Gyo first. I actually know nothing about those. The reason I wanted Uzumaki so much is that, like, well, it's the one I've heard of. So Gyo. I know nothing about, so I'll be going into the next one, completely blind, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. I expect it's going to be a lot of fun. Until then, I'll see you next time.